10 minutes. He said he wasn't a real long speaker. We'll find out here in a minute.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to thank Terry for this great crowd and Mayor Connor for being here, and Lori Love, who's been instrumental on this trip, and Ned Gerace, who's been a great friend and helped arrange this trip. It's wonderful to be here. This is such a beautiful spot. It was a long drive from Nashville, but I'm glad I made it. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running and what I'd like to do as governor for the state. I went to Vanderbilt Law School, came to Nashville in 1978, and the biggest thing that happened to me in law school was I met a woman. I also studied hard. I met a woman in my law school class who was a Nashville native, and we fell in love and go through a process of debating where we should live, and I live in Nashville. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a wonderful place to raise our 3 kids. I have a son who's a lawyer in Nashville, and he and his wife had their first child, our first grandchild, last Valentine's Day. We have 2 daughters who are graduating from college this year, and it was just a wonderful place for them to grow up, and this has been a beautiful state for the family to live. When I got out of law school, after a little bit of time, I joined the public defender's office there as an assistant, and it was really important work. I thought it was meaningful work. I felt I was helping people, protecting people's constitutional rights, giving people their day in court. But I also got a pretty good understanding, I think, of issues of poverty, issues around mental health issues, drug and alcoholism. And anyway, I ran for public defender eventually in 1990, was elected and then re-elected in 94 and 98. And then in 99, Bill Purcell became the mayor of Nashville. Bill asked me to leave the public defender's office and become the city's lawyer. I became the director of law in Nashville's attorney and ran the law department, about 35 lawyers. And then in 2007, when Bill's terms were up, I thought I was interested in running for mayor. There were some things I wanted to do for the city. So I got into the race, and my biggest memory of that race is I was probably the least well-known candidate. And when I got into the race, and I started well behind, and a poll came out. The election was in August, and about in March or something, a poll came out, which is not a scientific poll, it was just going online and voting with the newspaper, that I was in dead last, and I was not only, that was bad enough, but I was at like 5% of the vote. And I remember talking about that with my wife one morning when I was about to go out and campaign, and my then 13-year-old daughter, Frances, could hear us talking about it, and she got this really concerned look on her face the more we talked about it. She came up to me and she said, Dad, you can still get out. You can still withdraw from this thing. Luckily, I didn't. I hung in there, and I was elected mayor in September of '07. And I had 2 really different terms as mayor. I had the first term, Nashville was doing well, but about 8 months later, in '08, we go into the deepest recession since the Great Depression. And you had to make tough decisions about how you're going to keep the city moving forward. I had really clear priorities of things I wanted to work on: public education, public safety, and economic development. And so I needed to balance the budget, make cuts in the budget, but at the same time, work on our priorities and move the city forward. And I think we were able to do that. We continued to invest in education, which we didn't cut, and we actually added to public safety. And we made decisions around economic development where we were recruiting companies, keeping companies that were growing in Nashville, built a new convention center that has been a huge success, and the city began to move forward. And then in 2010, we had the flood in Nashville, which is probably the worst natural disaster we've had in 75 years. And the story of the flood, to me, will always be the response of the people in Nashville. I mean, they volunteered, they came out, 10, 20,000 people were on the streets helping cleaning it up. People were helping their neighbors, they were helping strangers, and we got back up on our feet faster than most places do. We came out of the recession earlier and stronger than a lot of places, and so in my second term, the city just took off. I mean, that's when the boom began. You started, the TV show Nashville came, the New York Times called us its city, tourism went through the ceiling. Businesses started moving in, the cranes started appearing all around the city. So I've had the, I've managed the city during tough times, and I've managed the city during a boom, and my advice to folks is, if you run for mayor and you get 2 terms, take the tough one first and have a kind of more enjoyable one second. I've been teaching at Belmont University, history, political science, a little bit of law, and I decided that I was going to run for governor. And here's why. I'm convinced that the people of Tennessee want a governor who is going to be sort of moderate, common sense, practical, get things done, not an ideologue. Someone who's going to be about moving the state forward and actually talking about the issues that matter to the voters. My experience, I think, as mayor is helpful in that sense. That we've had 2 good governors, Bill Haslam, Philip Edison, who come from a former mayor position. And what mayors bring to it is that as a mayor, when you run for office, you don't run, I didn't run in a partisan election. You run an election where you have to get Democrats, Republicans, and independents to vote for you. And then when you're doing the job, you don't do it on party lines. When you're making decisions, what's best for the city, what's going to make this a better place to live, what's going to make life better for the people who live in the city. And that's what we tried to do. And I think that's what the state needs. If you look at the state right now, I think the critical issues are, number 1, public education. I think that's the overriding thing that we have to get right as a state. I think, again, Governor Bredesen, Governor Haslam have done good work in that area. We need to keep that as a top priority. We need to be a state that produces more college graduates, but at the same time, we need to be a state that recognizes not everyone is going to want to get a college degree. Whether it's using community colleges, whether it's vocational training, apprenticeship programs, we need to give people the background if they don't choose to get a 4-year degree, where they can get a good job and raise a family. I think that's the key. I think paying our teachers well and keeping them in the profession is absolutely essential. We need to be able to attract good people and keep them. Probably the thing I hear most in rural areas from superintendents and members of school boards is the difficulty of keeping teachers because other districts can offer more money, and particularly teachers who do advanced math or science are really hard to keep. So we got to make sure that every part of the state's in a position to keep the best teachers and make sure that everybody is getting a good education. The second area I would mention is economic opportunity development. I'm a big believer that you got to have a strong private sector that is producing jobs, creating opportunities, allowing people to improve themselves, move ahead in life, and have a chance to advance. And you want to create a strong economy where you have the economic base to do the things you need to do, whether it be in education or healthcare. There are lots of parts of Tennessee that are booming. There's some parts of the state are really on fire right now in terms of the economy. Other parts are not. We need to be looking out for every part of the state. And then the third thing I would mention is healthcare. I think the legislature made probably the worst mistake in years when they didn't do the Medicaid expansion. Essentially what that did is we said no to the Medicaid expansion, and as a result, we've lost $3.5 billion or more in money that could have been used to give access to insurance for people with low incomes, people with disabilities, people with pre-existing conditions. And as a result of that, you have people who don't go to the hospital or seek attention when they're sick because they're afraid to, because they can't afford it. Or you have people going and they are facing financial ruin when they try to pay these bills. Or you have people going and they can't pay the bills and there's no reimbursement for the hospitals. Tennessee is second in the country behind Texas in the number of hospitals that have closed in recent years as a result of this failure to do the Medicaid expansion. We've had 10 hospitals close, and there are several that are sort of teetering right now. It has hit rural and small town Tennessee harder than any other area. And when you stop and think about what that means to a community, when you lose a hospital, it's hard to keep people living there. It's hard to attract senior citizens who are for retirement. It's hard to attract new residents, and it's hard to attract business. And when you think what a hospital means to most communities, things you care about, you care about your schools, you care about your churches, you care about your city hall, and you care about your hospital. And that is a real hard thing for a community to get over when they lose a hospital. So I think the next governor has got to be an advocate for Tennessee to get our fair share of Medicaid dollars. We got to look for creative solutions where we can find ways where we can give access to health care to all of our citizens. And we need to work together with nonprofits and the business community to get that done. One of the things we have to pay attention to is, Tennessee, if you look at where we rank on health issues, whether it's diabetes, whether it's heart disease, almost any category, we are in the bottom 10. And so when you look at healthcare costs, that's not going to change unless we start working to have some preventative medicine and have people live a better life. Because you just can't, as long as you're performing at that level, you're constantly going to have people in need of additional medical care. So preventive medicine, encouraging people to live healthier is absolutely key. This is a great state. I've been from one point to the other. Now that I've been here in Mountain City, and it's beautiful in all parts of it. It's very diverse. We have the friendliest people in the world here. I think the state has got a lot going for it, and our best days are still ahead of us. But we got to take care of these basic issues, and we have to make sure that we're focused on the issues that really matter to people, and don't get sort of drawn into the chaos of Washington, D.C. and how they can't get anything done there. We need to cooperate with each other and move our state forward. The campaign's gone very well. I feel that we've had great success with the polls and fundraising and everything else. I'm very confident about the direction we're taking, and I'd be happy to answer any easy questions. You got any questions they want to?
Since in this part of Tennessee, and you talked about health, and one of our problems is the opioid situation. Have you any ideas along that line? We'll even ask you to solve this idea.
No, I think, the opioid issue obviously ties into health care, ties into access to treatment, and the whole Medicaid issue. And it's also, to me, a prime example of an issue where there should be broad-based bipartisan agreement on what to do. Everybody agrees it's a crisis. I mean, there are people dying, people suffering throughout the state from that. And to me, what I think should happen is, number one, I think there needs to be a big public education campaign around it. This crisis has sort of been with us, or people have been aware of it for about two and a half years now. But it's long pre-existed that public knowledge. We need to inform the public, particularly young people, just like anti-drunk driving or anti-smoking, the dangers of opioid use, and that needs to be a very aggressive and very elaborate campaign. Secondly, I think you got to give people access to treatment. If people can't afford treatment, or if they're being turned away because of their lack of insurance or whatever, we got to find a way to answer that problem. I mean, everybody has called it, from the president down to local government. Everybody says it's a crisis. But if you're going to come out of the crisis, you got to put resources into doing it, and treatment's part of it. I think clearly you got to work on that, on limiting the over-prescription of opioids. You got to deal with pain centers. You got to deal with the pharmaceutical industry and in the medical field to make sure everybody is playing by the rules and understands what the dangers are. And then lastly, I'd say, this thing is kind of morphed. It keeps changing. I mean, part of the treatment for opioids has become an issue, but fentanyl with heroin is a huge issue. And there are people who are profiting off the sale of illegal drugs. I mean, there's no question some of these drugs are just simply illegal. And there needs to be, law enforcement needs to have the resources they need to enforce the law and prosecute people who are benefiting from the pain and of families all over our state. I think it's an area where, those are my 4 ideas. There are other ideas. I don't see it as a partisan issue. I think that this is something everybody agrees on. We should be able to get something done soon, hopefully, on that here in Tennessee. I know the governor is going to say something about it on Monday, I think.
Mr. Deeb,
Yep.
one of the things I never hear spoken of is the insurance company involvement in this. Clinically across the country, pain specialists say that alternative medicine, to include acupuncture and certain types of yoga, are much more effective with especially back pain than any kind of drug, physical therapy and other things, but insurance companies won't touch it. And I think that, I mean, whether it's listening to something on the radio or the TV or hearing a doctor or anyone else talk, I've never heard a conversation about expanding the coverage for things that actually are proven across the country medically to work. And I don't know how we address that.
Well, I think that should be part of the discussion moving forward. I mean, obviously, as I say, there are a lot of different ideas and good ideas, and looking at other forms of treatment that would be non-narcotic is a good idea. Thank you.
So are you saying you would appoint a commission then to look at alternatives here, alternatives in the entire, obviously, problem?
Well, we got a commission right now, so, and look, I mean, there's an opioid commission that has been working with the state, and I think is gonna report out on some of my recommendations on Monday. And then hopefully that is the beginning of a broader conversation within the legislature about how the state's gonna approach it. I mean, I don't think this is an issue that waits until the new governor comes into office in January of next year. I mean, I think, again, I think this is an area where there should be broad-based bipartisan agreement that we need to do something, and I think hopefully people will. I trust that people are gonna act in the best interest of the state and actually focus on this problem. And hopefully that starts on Monday.
Does the governor have the ability to keep the prison system in the state of Tennessee public as opposed in the hands of private for-profit companies?
Well, the governor and the legislature do, and, you know, there are lots of issues around that right now, and there's concerns about recent reporting regarding private prisons. I mean, I think the complicated issue right now would be, it's difficult to immediately unwind from the investment the state has made over the last 30 years or more in private prisons. But that is something the state decides, yes. Yes.
Mr. Dean, hi, thank you for being here today. I have a comment and a question for you, and I think it'll be easy. So another topic that we don't hear very often when folks are running for office is land and water conservation and environmental issues, which is really too bad because healthy environment and clean air and clean water and access to outdoor recreation venues, all of those things are very enmeshed with healthy people and healthy cities and a healthy environment, and education and economic growth and all of that.
Right.
So, and also in Tennessee, public opinion polls have consistently shown that the majority of Tennesseans think that land and water conservation is important.
Key.
So if you achieve the office of the governor, what will be your conservation legacy for the state of Tennessee?
Well, first, in terms of that issue, we've actually done quite a bit on that in this campaign. We actually have a group, we had an event, conservationists for me, for Karl for governor. When I was mayor, I worked to expand our park system dramatically. We doubled the amount of greenways that we have in the city. We actually did the city's first open space plan, public-private partnership to get that done, and we set about acquiring land, and we set goals that we surpassed dramatically. I have been a big believer in encouraging healthy living, and I think a big part of that is making the healthy choice an easy choice, so people have access to bikeways, greenways, parks, open space, and that's something that I've worked on in the past and will continue to work on. I should tell you, I told you the story of meeting my wife at Vanderbilt, and she has spent a good portion of her career as an environmental lawyer. She's the founder of the Southern Environmental Legal Office here in Tennessee. She just recently left that. And so the environment's a key subject. I mean, I think, Tennessee, I think you can have a strong economy, and you can have a strong developing economy, and you can also have a strong position on maintaining the beauty of the state and maintaining natural resources. resources. So what I would want to do as governor is to make sure, number one, everybody wants clean air, everybody wants clean water. I think we should have the best, we should go back to when Governor McWhorter was in office and have the best, and Governor Bredesen have the best state parks in the country. I think, you know, people come to Tennessee for a variety of reasons, but one of the most paramount reasons is the state's natural beauty and access to the outdoors. And I think we have to preserve the beauty of the state, and we have to work to make sure that the state remains attractive and that it's an area where people want to live. So that'd be high on my list of things I do. Great.
You're speaking in generalities. Do you have any specific ideas of what you would do
About what?
on the environmental? You're saying we need to do this, we need to do this. How would you do it?
Well, I think there's a variety of ways. I mean, number
Now,
one,
how did you do it in Nashville?
How did I do it in Nashville? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, very specifically, we built more greenways. We built more access to use for recreation.
And where did you get the money? How was the money to do that raised?
It was taxes. I mean, it's general funds of the city. And we bought open space land through public-private partnerships that we did. I mean, a lot of it was public money, but we also worked to get private citizens or businesses to contribute to get that done, and we were able to, you know, probably the only good thing about the recession is that there were a lot of great land deals then, and so we were doing this during the recession, and we were able to get, you know, we bought a whole bend in the river that we preserved during that time. It was just more available. But that effort continues. I mean, and we added park space, which again requires us either to get contributions of land or to make it invested by the city, but we prioritize that, and we were willing to put city resources into making that happen.
So you would do the same idea on the state level?
Right, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think you have to invest in your city, or you have to invest in your state. I mean, if we're not willing to invest in the future of the state, then no one else is gonna be. And I think if you're saying the future of the state, it's important for us to have open space, it's important for us to have parks, it's important for us to preserve the beauty. The state has a role in that. And ideally, you look for partnerships with others to help reduce the cost, but that's something I think it's appropriate to use state funds to do.
Bringing up state funds is a horrible sort of question coming from that. Do you have the courage to raise taxes?
Well, I don't want to. I think you don't. I mean, I think, you know, number one, the income tax issue is off the table. We have a very, we have a high sales tax already, and so I don't think most citizens want to see their taxes go up. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to look for ways to manage the city, or to manage the state in a way that you don't have to do that. And that's what I try to do. I mean, right now, the state is, as I say, the state is very strong economically. The state is very strong. All right. Well, thank you all for your attention, and thanks for coming, and hope you vote for me. That's kind of the key. I need your help and need your support. Thank you.